This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
Welcome back to another episode of Hybrid Healing Hour. Today, we are going to be dispelling nutrition myths with one of our favorite dietitians, Susan Greeley. Welcome back, Susan.
Hi, Deanna. Hi, Brian. Thank you for having me back.
Yes.
This is exciting.
And if people have not listened to our other episode where we had you on, why don't you go ahead and tell our audience now, today, a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
I'd be happy to. Thank you. So again, Susan Greeley. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist of 30 years, and I am presently Senior Vice President and National Director of Wellness Services at Castle Connolly Private Health Partners. I run the Send Solution Wellness Program focused on sleep, exercise, nutrition, and stress management. So I spend a lot of time talking all things health and wellness and not just nutrition. And I still always love talking everything about nutrition. And this is a very fun topic because there are so many myths out there. And so I'm ready to do a lot of myth busting.
Awesome.
Yeah. In our practice, we hear it all. I mean, we're just going to scratch the surface today of some of the myths out there, but I'll tell you, with social media and TikTok,
it kills me.
There's a new myth coming out every day.
Yes, absolutely. It's like everybody's a professional nowadays, right?
Right. Diet fads, myths. Yes, the nutrition experts abound.
Well, let's dive right in. So the first one we have is that fruit is bad for you. And I think this means because of the sugar content. So can you clarify
Right,
that?
and we have diabetics who always say, well, I shouldn't be eating any fruit.
Shouldn't be eating fruit because it's bad for me. It's too high in sugar. That is, okay, myth number one. No fruits are bad for the general population. And I will premise this conversation by saying we're talking about the general population. Personalized and individual nutrition is very different and specific, of course. In general, though, Americans don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. They don't get enough fiber. And I come to fruit's defense pretty much in every conversation with clients. It's very funny because right now we're a sugar phobic society or carb phobic, and that's a shame. So that's why we're here today too, to bring healthy whole foods back that need to be in people's diets. Most fruits are going to give you some fiber, they're high water content, and they're low calorie. And that's important when we live in a society with so much obesity. So just look at it from a calorie standpoint, and then the micronutrients that you get, potassium, folate. Most Americans don't even think in terms of micronutrients, let alone what specifically. Vitamin C. I call vitamin C the mother of all vitamins, right? And so you can't talk even about things like anti-inflammatory diet without incorporating fruits and, of course, vegetables, but specifically fruit. So myth number one, fruit is not bad for you at all. In fact, I encourage most people to snack on fruit.
And if you could just tell our listeners, how many servings of fruits and vegetables are you recommending for the average person?
Total fruits and vegetables, 7 to 9 daily. If you have even one serving of fruit and 5 servings or 6 servings of vegetables, that would be great. A lot of people eat more more vegetables than fruits. It's
really?
fine.
I'm actually surprised by that. I feel like people tend to eat more fruit than vegetable.
Oh, maybe. That's funny. Okay, so I work with the salad eaters and those who are focused on, getting more of the non-starchy vegetables. I think you're right. Like youngers between smoothies and juices and all that.
Yeah, just
I
because
bet you're right. Yeah,
and I'm always amazed of how many people eat like fruit for breakfast.
Yeah.
As their first meal of the day. That's maybe one I'm not a fan of. I always recommend protein as the first meal of the day, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So another thing on the line of fruit is, what fruit is healthier? Is it canned, fresh, frozen? What do you?
Oh, that's a very good topic. I default to fresh first for the benefit of getting what's in season. And I think that that's what needs to be prioritized most. Eating seasonal and local foods is really important. And that's, to me, the best and easiest approach and typically the most cost effective, meaning, those are more affordable than, say, organic berries when they're not in season. Okay, like it's summertime, I say do eat local strawberries and other berries and peaches and things like that. But that said, I keep frozen fruits in my freezer at all times because they're a simple, easy go-to. I'd rather that my kids are opening the freezer and taking out some frozen fruits and making themselves a smoothie rather than, say, go and get some sweetened beverage at any store locally.
Exactly, where they add a ton of sugar, or
Yes,
what people might not know is like turbinado is also sugar.
Oh yeah,
and they're like, and people don't realize that. I'm like, every smoothie place is like adds turbinado. I'm like, no turbinado.
Doesn't it sound healthy?
It sounds healthy.
It's funny you say that. So, did I answer that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So the next myth we hear a lot is eggs are bad for you.
Oh, poor eggs. Okay, I love this. I can't even believe that this myth, clearly a myth, is still around. And you're probably going to hear me say essentially the same answer a lot, that whole foods first, and eggs are a healthy whole food for most people. Again, we're not talking about the small percentage of the population that may actually need to avoid high cholesterol foods for a very specific reason, genetic. But again, the healthy population, I say eat more eggs. They're such a great source of a simple protein that's then loaded with all of the micronutrients that we need in the yolk. So when we are talking about whether eggs are good or bad, people are referring to the egg yolk. And that is where most of the nutritional value is. I tend to say all of the nutritional value is. The egg white is simply solid protein, and there's not much of it. There is actually more protein in the yolk. So when you're looking at eggs for that protein factor, and then all of the micronutrients. So if you want to start your day with protein, I think eggs are a great source of that. And then if you want some fruit, have a side of fresh fruit, and that's where you're getting the fiber and the vitamin C and folate that are not in the egg yolk.
And I'm a big fan of choline, which is good for your brain, and that's in eggs.
The egg yolk is one of the best sources.
Absolutely. And this is for the general population we are talking about, because we do gut testing in our office, which is for, checking leaky gut. And eggs do come up sometimes when people tend to eat them every day. They can become highly inflammatory. And so sometimes you have to take a break for a little time period, and then you can slowly incorporate them back in. But they're talking about the cholesterol, eggs, do they really cause high cholesterol? I haven't seen it. I can say. Yeah. So I eat eggs. I love eggs.
And we see it even with our patients with lipid testing and advanced lipid testing. People with high cholesterol, typically it's genetic. Their liver is making the cholesterol. It's not so much the cholesterol they're eating.
That's why I mentioned that. A small percentage of the population. I can't discount the fact that you to do such advanced testing in your office, and I do know that, and I love that. And then it's easier to make very specific personalized recommendations. But again, if somebody doesn't have issues, you're making these broad recommendations for a healthy whole foods Mediterranean diet.
Right.
And we do know there's so much evidence that that really is the best approach.
And there was a time where doctors were telling their patients not to eat cholesterol, not to eat eggs, but that was a while ago.
Okay, but I have to also admit, so then they tell them to get the egg beaters or the heart healthy, and it's absolutely disgusting what those are. Those are not eggs. No. They're not eggs. It's the ingredient list is absurd, and I highly recommend to avoid that. And it's just crazy that there's a little heart healthy symbol on the box, and I'm like, it comes in a box.
Exactly.
Like, stop.
That alone is your indication.
Yes.
Exactly.
So while we're on the
talk,
so
we love whole eggs.
Yes, we love whole eggs. So let's talk about other high cholesterol foods, though.
Okay.
So, are high cholesterol foods bad for you?
Shrimp is one that's
Shrimp
got a
is
bad
one.
rep.
Avocado is one.
Oh, avocado has no cholesterol.
Oh.
Yeah, so no plant foods have cholesterol in them. People still get confused.
That's a great one.
People still get confused by that. So dietary cholesterol can only come from animal sources. So eggs, shrimp, cheese, milk, all meats, all that. But no, your plant sources of fats have no cholesterol.
Fabulous. All right.
People still get confused. I used to laugh and used to joke years ago when you'd pick up a banana and it would say, remember when cholesterol was so evil? Yeah. Cholesterol-free food. You'll still occasionally see that.
Now it's gluten. Now everything says gluten-free.
It's gluten-free, exactly. Go ahead.
All right, moving on. So lectins are bad.
Ooh, lectins.
And this comes from
word.
Dr. Gundry, I'm assuming.
And,
he's got books. Yes, Plant Paradox.
A lot of people read that and thought they needed to follow it. So I'll flat out say it's a big myth that humans need to avoid lectins. It's virtually impossible. Lectins are a protein on a lot of food, not just plant foods. A lot of foods that we consume in general contain lectins, and what are they? And they're nature's way of protecting certain foods from pests eating them. But in general, it is called an anti-nutrient. So there are certain compounds in many of the foods we eat that are called anti-nutrients, and that means that they can interfere with the absorption of other nutrients. Okay, oxalic acid is one of them. Lectins are one of them, and because they're in a lot of foods, it's kind of become popular to talk about. But the bottom line is we don't need to avoid foods that contain lectins, because that's virtually the entire Mediterranean diet. And when we're out there, again, talking about a healthy whole foods Mediterranean diet being the healthiest for most people, you can't say that and then in the next conversation have you avoid lectins. There are very few people who have problems with it. They cause a lot of GI issues, cramping, gas, bloating, but I don't know anybody who consumes uncooked legumes, and that would be a terrible source of lectins. You can diminish them. You can decrease the amount simply by cooking, sprouting, boiling, soaking. So let's say you have mung beans came to mind because they're on the list, but even beans, any
lentils.
Lentils.
They're a big one.
Lentils are common, and they're so good for you.
I just had lentil soup yesterday.
Excellent.
I love it.
See? Great plant-based protein, source of iron, other nutrients. I really always shy away from telling somebody to never eat any specific food. Like the absolutes, those are just really harmful messages for a lot of people because it instills fear, and then they get confused and then they give it all up anyway, if you see that. So, now we're encouraging the general population to eat more plant proteins. And one of the best sources of plant proteins is legumes, so beans of all kind. Mm-hmm. So lectins, bring it back to what lectins are. They're certainly nothing to be afraid of and for the general population to avoid.
All right.
So along the lines of cholesterol, we also hear a lot that fats and oils are bad for you.
We still hear that, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, the fat-free decade went away. It died, didn't it? But no, we're still back to some of these old messages, back to the cholesterol, the eggs, the fat. I still know clients who want to eat fat-free or low-fat. They seek out low-fat products. There's no benefit to that. You have to look at the context of your overall diet, and we know that for maintaining our health, we need good fats, and that's the difference. Types of fats matter most, and I can elaborate on that.
Go for it.
Okay,
Elaborate, please.
Okay, so all fats are made up of some amount of mono and polyunsaturated and saturated fats, right? And so when we hear about saturated fats and cholesterol, you can't ever fully avoid saturated fat unless you're not eating any fats, and that's not healthy. We know that. For our health and functioning, we need carbs, fats, and proteins. But in any case, there are 2 essential fatty acids, and they are both polyunsaturated fats. So you need a varied diet to get them. The only sources naturally are plant foods to get your polyunsaturated essential fatty acids. Okay, and I'm talking about omega-3s and omega-6s. So unless you're consuming those naturally in your diet, you're not getting them, and therefore that can over time lead to a whole host of health problems. And a lot of people don't get enough of the good fats, sadly, in the American diet, and they're getting a lot of bad fats. And it's very confusing to consumers. Bottom line is, if you're out eating a lot of restaurant foods, a lot of fast foods, fried foods, ultra-processed foods, you're consuming the unhealthy versions of these fats. And that's the bottom line. But back, you mentioned avocados, Deanna, olive oil. When you look at the Mediterranean diet, it is actually high in fat for most people. And I tell people all the time, do use olive oil on a daily basis. Like if you're making a salad at home, I do no bottled dressings myself. I use good olive oil and put it on. In cooking, I also use olive oil, avocado oil. I don't heat it to super high temperatures and destroy the composition of the oils. That's also how we cook impacts the health of the food and the oils. So oils are very, very sensitive. And I think that's what's misunderstood. So the way we handle them and process them is actually the most important part. So, yeah, it's complicated.
Yes, thanks for clearing that up. And, I mean, would you say, though, avocados come in all different sizes, right? So this is kind of a debate I have. And I have seen with one person only, where they told me, their cholesterol was higher, like extremely higher than the last time. And she's like, oh, I've been eating an avocado a day. And she's like, I'm going to cut that out. And I was like, okay. And it did come down. So there could have been other factors, but avocado is good. But do you have to eat a whole one a day? I mean, maybe in moderation?
Exactly. There's a good point in there that you brought up. For that person, and you're checking her levels, for her, maybe she's a petite woman, her total daily fat intake was probably excessive for her.
Well, and she probably had other fats. The avocado may not have just been the only fat.
That, and I'd be surprised if that increased her total and her LDL.
Right.
But maybe it did, because in the course of a day, her percent of calories from fat was probably high. And the more fat you eat, the higher the percentage of saturated as well. So as you consume more fat, total fats, that of course increase the amount of the saturated fat that,
as well.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. Yeah. So what about carbs? Are carbs bad?
Carbs. Carbs are not bad. There are no, again, absolutes with our carbs, fats, and proteins. They're just simply misunderstood. Carbs are less confusing than the fats. And maybe if you'd have me back again, we'll spend even more time on fats. But switching to carbs, again, carbs, fats, and protein. So our population, and now on TikTok and social media, people talk in terms of the macronutrients all the time. But carbohydrates really are still the majority of our diet. Okay, they provide the most calories for most people. And so there are good carbs and bad carbs. There really are. This is where I will use the terms good and bad because it's just easier. So things like all refined sugar, high fructose corn syrup, those are carbohydrates, and those are not good for us. They're really not good for anybody. We can, of course, have some discretionary calories in our treats every day, but the majority of our calories daily, or our foods, should come from high fiber, complex carbohydrates.
Once again, I'm going to go back to say whole foods, right?
Whole foods, exactly.
Like, why not eat actual, like, potatoes or yucca or something like that, rather than bread or
right.
Things that are processed.
Even breads don't have to be terrible for you, and turn it into, there are healthy versions of breads, and they're terrible. There's the good, the bad, and ugly among breads.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah. You can get fresh sourdough. I like to encourage people to do sourdough. And why? A fresh bread is going to not have all the preservatives and will not have a lot of packaged breads also have high fructose corn syrup in them, unfortunately, and other added sweeteners. Some multigrain and whole grain, I think this is one of the things we wanted to talk about. Whole grains and multigrains. Grains are good for us. It just depends in what form. I personally do like sprouted grain bread. So if we're looking at the healthiest breads, I would consider fresh sourdough and then sprouted grain breads to be the healthiest. And they're good sources of fiber and B vitamins. And
this is, of course, if you're not gluten intolerant or gluten sensitive.
Yes. And gluten, I think we're not even tackling gluten today because there are a lot of issues with gluten for a lot of people.
Right.
And
usually the people who, we could have a whole different podcast on gluten issues.
Yes.
I think we'll
that are very real for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And grains aren't for everybody. I do want to put that out there. So other carbohydrates, all fruits, all vegetables. And the statement I made at the beginning, Americans don't get enough fruits and vegetables every day.
Right.
So even whatever you're eating now, if you just focus on adding more vegetables to your diet, for fruits and vegetables, but do add more vegetables. And I will still stick by vegetables of all kind. They don't always have to be the non-starchy, meaning you can have potatoes, sweet potatoes. You mentioned the yucca. I love all those foods. Yeah. Tubers, your
even like parsnips, carrots.
I was going to say, I'm thinking rutabaga, and I stopped myself from saying it because most people don't eat rutabaga, but I love all those roasted root vegetables. They're really, really good for you. They're actually very good for our livers.
And eat the skins too.
And eat the skin, absolutely. A lot of nutrients are in the skin of all those, so that's giving you more fiber. Most people don't get enough fiber, and they're filling. So if for no other reason they are tasty and they're filling, people need to be full. We can't just continue to eat fat and protein. And I do see a lot of people, we didn't talk about weight yet, but a lot of people gain weight by eating too much protein and too much fat.
That's actually our next myth we want to bust.
Talk
so what about weight loss? Is it all about calories in versus calories out?
It's actually very complicated and personal.
Yes.
This is the one area that really does need to be personalized, because I've worked with so many people. We're talking thousands over how many years as a dietitian. My team, health coaches, you all work with people. Weight loss is a really complicated thing for a lot of people, and for others it can be very straightforward. I start to exercise and cut out some of the crap and they lose weight, right? Don't you even see couples where the man makes
Drops
the same
weight.
drops weight
Absolutely.
instantly, the woman doesn't. So people are on medications. Some people have hormonal imbalances, truly. So it's really important to start with that exam, get the full panel of blood work, check your thyroid, check your hormones. I know you both obviously do that for your patients, because it isn't always the obvious. It isn't always the low-hanging fruit. And then that's when I feel bad for somebody where they are, quote unquote, doing everything right and still struggling with the weight. It can be that they've had a lifetime of altered gut health and they don't know it. They don't know what their gut bacteria are. So weight loss is actually quite complicated and really needs to be personalized.
Couldn't agree more.
And I remember when the HCG diet was big and people were eating 500 calories. And yeah, they were losing weight, but they were also doing it in an unhealthy way. And almost every one of them regained all the weight back again.
I had to say jinx on that. We said regained because that was the biggest, saddest outcome of that, was that weight gain. And when you gain it back and you gain more fat, clearly they weren't doing enough exercise to regain lean body mass. And then it puts you in this bad metabolic state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about weight loss, there's a belief that certain foods can cause weight loss.
Is this one of the myths? Which
Yes.
name some. I got to hear this.
Grapefruit, cayenne pepper, vinegar.
Oh yeah, apple cider
Apple cider vinegar
can
is
magically
huge.
burn
Yes.
fat. I shouldn't say I love this myth, but it cracks me up, because people come to you and say, "Oh, if I just add apple cider vinegar, or if I eat the grapefruit diet, 7 grapefruits a day," or whatever it was. I believe my sister did that way back in the 70s or 80s. Fad diets. They're fad diets, and if it were only that simple. So no, there is no single fruit or no single food adding any specific food that can actually melt away fat, lead to weight loss. Unfortunately, you have to look at the whole, diet and lifestyle. So no, cayenne and
There's no
spicy
magic.
pepper. No, there's
food
no
you
And
magic.
that's the key. Everyone's looking for a magic bullet.
I mean, think about all the supplements that have been out. I mean, even I'm just gonna say the wrong name. It was
EGCG or
yeah, it was like the green tea extract
Yeah,
is what
green
you're
tea
talking about.
extract.
Yeah, but I was thinking of for some reason I want to say ginkgo biloba, but that's not it. But there was a Garcinia, the Garcinia
yes,
Cambogia.
yes.
that was huge.
Oh, it had its spotlight. I forgot about
yeah.
that one.
Yeah,
And
What do you know? It
Deanna's,
disappeared.
Deanna's too young to remember this, and you're probably too young to remember, but there was a grapefruit diet pill in the 70s.
Oh,
Right, they made the pill
Right.
along
So
with
they
it.
they said that since grapefruit causes weight loss, you can take this pill instead of eating grapefruit every day.
wow.
But you do that and eat 500 calories,
Right.
and they think, yes, they attribute the weight loss, of course, to the grapefruit pill. It's really funny. So that one, it still makes me laugh, I have to admit.
Yes.
'Cause they're
So,
so
what about
nonsense.
soy? Soy has such a bad rap
Oh,
out
that
there.
soy's bad?
So I was actually in the grocery store recently, and I bought eggs that literally said soy free. I got them because they were on sale. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't really think about the soy aspect. What about then? Oh, then a guy behind me, I was in the checkout. He's like, "Does that mean these have soy?" And I was like, I don't know, sir. I'm sorry. But it was just kind of funny. I every time I'm in line, I swear somebody makes a comment
And
about what I'm
That
buying.
whole scenario, that person next to you is going to trust some stranger in the checkout line for
That's where people get their
nutrition
advice.
information.
But we've also noticed every time we go to a coffee place now, soy milk has pretty much disappeared. It was once the most popular non-dairy milk, and now it's hard to find.
Right, because health food stores back in the 70s and 80s were cool, and they knew what they were doing. I had to say that. Cool people, the cool kids, know that soy is good for you.
Yep.
That's okay, so you all saying it, and I had to put a little humor in there. I think that you're joining now my mission, because it's education, that soy foods are some of the healthiest for cardiovascular disease and cancer prevention, and it's the opposite of what people actually think. There's still a lot of fear factor around soy, for men growing man boobs and for women causing breast cancer, and it couldn't be farther from the truth. There's a lot of research out there to show that it's actually so healthy soy foods, I have to, premise it with that. So things like edamame and organic tofu. And I personally only eat organic soy foods and use organic unsweetened soy milk in whatever I choose to use it in, meaning I drink black coffee. But if I did a coffee with a milk or a milk alternative, it would be unsweetened organic soy. And I love to tell people about this because if you're looking for a dairy alternative that has good protein and plant protein, soy is my dairy alternative of choice for people. And it's really, really important to remove that fear factor. So there's so many health benefits of soy. And just for men and women, looking at the cardiovascular benefits alone, I think is really important to understand. A lot of people are trying to lower LDL, and incorporating healthy whole soy foods into your diet is helpful for that.
When I was in college, we used to have like a trail nut mix after our games that we would pass around on our bus rides. And I loved the soy nuts in it. Like they're a little crunch. It was delicious.
Always, they are.
Yeah. And edamame is soy. So I think people have to be wise about, like you said, their selection. Now, probably the bad soy is all the filler in the frozen foods you might be eating, or the soybean oil that's in everything when you're frying things.
Correct.
So
very different.
It's very different. And so you have to be cautious about your other soy exposure, I think, in foods.
Yes. And again, some people are sensitive, people who have allergies in general. I mean, I have clients all the time who are allergic to soy.
Right. Then they really have to avoid those.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. But again, for the general healthy population, do incorporate healthy whole soy foods into your diet. Back to our discussion of the fats and oils, I would never buy commercial soybean oil off the shelf in the grocery store in those clear bottles, in the plastic bottles. I don't buy any of those.
Right.
So that's not what we're talking about either.
But that's what's used in a lot of the packaged foods.
Yes, exactly.
And that's why I read all of my labels, and I try to avoid anything that was made with soybean oil. But I love edamame, and I will eat that, and I will eat soy nuts, and I will have soy milk, organic soy milk, like you said.
And occasionally tofu.
Right. Yes.
Right. So even if you are not vegan, plant-based, vegetarian, anything, if you are a meat eater, omnivore, carnivore, doesn't even matter how you identify your diet. I say do incorporate these healthy plant proteins into your diet.
Absolutely.
Meaning edamame and tofu specifically. And soy milk's an easy one. So to all you coffee shop owners out there, bring the organic soy milk back.
My thing with coffee shops is they always have the sweetened milks.
Yes.
Even the oat milk, the almond milk. I'm like, get rid of the sugar. Like this is, I always ask, and they're like, I'm like, how much sugar is in there? And a lot of times they look at me like, I don't know. And I'm like, can you grab me the carton, please? Like, I need to examine the milk you're giving me. Like, I have no problem asking for that. And I think everybody else should too.
I love
oat milk has to be one of the worst, right?
Yeah, I mean, oat milk is literally just
the highest in carbohydrate, and then they add more sugar to it. So there's like sugar upon sugar. And that's what people are overlooking. So they'll vilify things like soy milk, but then they're pouring more sugar upon sugar into their coffee.
Absolutely. And why am I not losing weight? Sorry. So
hidden sugars.
So Himalayan salt versus sea salt versus Celtic salt. Which is the healthier table salt?
We hear that those salts are healthier than table salt.
Sorry, folks. Well, it depends. What are you looking for? If you're looking for a finishing salt and flavor and you're a gourmand, you're cooking at home, I think the most important thing to understand is that people confuse salt and sodium, right? And so when you're choosing salt is a high sodium food, of course. But most Americans consume more sodium in other foods than what they're actually using as far as like salt on their foods at home. So if you're adding one of those salts at home because you're doing your own cooking, kudos to you. Bravo. And then I say among those, but is Himalayan salt better for you than your iodized table salt? No.
Salt is sodium chloride.
Salt is sodium chloride. There are some versions that are slightly lower in your total amount of sodium. But in general, when you're salting your food at the table, it's all containing sodium chloride, and no, there isn't one that's healthier than the other.
You mean
others can disagree.
Does the color matter? What about pink versus black versus? Because that's what I see out there now. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many different types of salt.
They do have different flavors.
Okay. So
And-
not
And the
necessarily a
foodie in
health
me-
benefit.
Correct. I'm not choosing my finishing salt for anything other than flavor, quite honestly.
Good.
And then another caveat also is for people who are using light salt, which is potassium
Potassium
chloride. So if you're on a low potassium diet, you have to be careful because that can give you a lot of potassium.
It's interesting you bring that up. I haven't seen those salt substitutes in a very long time. They used to actually be very common. But yeah, potassium chloride, I don't recommend for people that, and this is, again, specifically to a population that's on a renal diet and even people with kidney disease. This gets so misunderstood. Unfortunately, now people Google, they go to the doctor, they'll get some labs, they'll be like, oh my gosh, do I need to cut out potassium or like be on a renal diet? Most people don't. Unless you're told by your physician, you really, or your nephrologist, you need to be on a renal diet, you don't. But for those who are, it can be very dangerous, and I have seen that.
Yep.
So moving on to protein.
Yes.
How much protein can we digest at one time?
Oh, that's individual. There's the size of the human being is really what determines.
The myth that we hear is that you can only absorb 30 grams of protein at a time.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what that. Yeah, the myth in there. So that is a myth because everybody is different, and it's not true that we can't digest more than 30 grams of protein. If that were the case, most people would be kind of wasting all of that protein that they're eating. A lot of people eat more than 30 grams of protein per meal.
One chicken breast can have 40 to 50.
Easily,
Yeah,
exactly.
or even more depending on the large chicken breast out there nowadays.
Yes. So that is a myth. That comes down to your specific needs and actually how your body digests your food and metabolism. But
And I think the bigger problem is that people aren't getting enough protein, not that they're getting too much protein.
Right.
that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't even want to put a cap on the amount of protein per meal because we still see this. Even though we have a protein-focused society now, most people still undereat protein. It's really interesting. Or older adults undereat protein all the time. Those who are in the age group where they need to be thinking about eating more protein, young growing people, it's, again, individual. I don't know where I want to go with that because it's...
Nope, you've answered it.
Okay.
And then another myth about protein is that protein can cause kidney damage. And I want to hear what you have to say because I can tell you where this comes from. But
Right. Don't you have a background in...
So, yeah,
Nephrology.
in
Oh,
nephrology,
okay.
with nephrology patients, when someone has kidney damage, and we're talking about significant kidney damage,
damage is
yes,
already done.
we do tell them to be on a lower protein diet. And I think people interpreted that to mean that the protein caused the kidney damage.
See, that's a huge leap. That's a complete myth, misinformation. If you've heard that, protein does not cause kidney damage.
Right.
Very, very unhealthy diets can over time our kidneys, right? We have two through life, and there are a lot of other things we put into our body that can cause kidney damage. Number one is various medications. You can speak to that. So
Uncontrolled high blood pressure. I mean,
uncontrolled high blood
Diabetes.
pressure.
diabetes. Not enough fluids, taking a ton of NSAID medications. Like,
back
the
to-
list goes on and on.
Yeah. Let's say you're on no medication, but you have uncontrolled hypertension. I think we all love to talk about hypertension and how diet is the first approach to treating hypertension, so high blood pressure.
Yep.
It's not the amount of protein you're eating, but let's say you're somebody who eats lunch meats every single day. You're getting a very high sodium diet, and we're throwing the protein under the bus, but really forgetting that it's about these high sodium processed food diets.
So what I'm hearing is another topic is maybe the type of protein you get matters.
Yes, I should have said that first.
Okay. And so, if you're going to eat a ton of processed lunch meats, that's probably not the best because there's nitrates in them and other
Flavor enhancers, there's
color
a lot of,
enhancers.
there's a combination of preservatives.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not just the nitrates that are so bad for us. It's all those other flavor enhancers. Pick up any package of hot dogs or even packaged ham, turkey. These are favorites of people, and they eat them on a daily basis. So to your question, does the quality of the protein matter or the type of protein? I say this for all calories. The quality of your calories matters most. So types of calories do matter most. If you're going and you're buying organic chicken and cooking it home and making a chicken salad sandwich out of it and you salt it, that's fabulous. That's really good for you versus going to a place where you don't know how they're cooking the chicken and making your chicken salad and eating a chicken salad sandwich taken out. I'm not going to discourage people. We eat out all the time,
Right.
but know
what you're getting, kind of.
exactly,
Right.
and start with the whole protein first. So when I'm talking about animal proteins, that's what I mean. So start with beef or chicken or pork or lamb or whatever,
Or eggs.
or eggs, of course, exactly, and then
But that leads
can
into
control the
another one
sodium.
now. So what about plant-based protein? Can you get enough protein plant-based foods? Can you get enough protein from plant-based foods?
Yes, you can. Oh, I thought you were going to ask about the sodium content
No.
of that, because those can be much higher in sodium than the animal sources of protein. But your question was the myth, I guess, is you don't get enough protein.
If you're plant-based.
And that's completely false. I actually debunked that myth about 30 some years ago when I was in my dietetic internship, and I did a little video called Going Meatless. And I did this on video. I would walk around to a farmer's market and plant people and have them ask me questions to debunk the myths. And the first one was, my child is going vegetarian. I'm afraid they won't get enough protein. So vegetarian is different than fully vegan or plant-based. Mm-hmm. So if you're vegetarian, some do eat eggs and dairy. So it's much easier to get adequate protein when you're incorporating some dairy and eggs. But even on a fully vegan diet, meaning no animal foods and no animal proteins at all, it is, I'll say the word easy, to get enough protein when you really make an effort to get variety, and you have to incorporate whole grains and beans and nuts and seeds and good non-starchy vegetables. And if you have a good varied diet that includes all of those, you'll absolutely get enough protein. And then the amount. You have to eat enough food.
So therefore, that leads to another, one of these, all the diet kicks out there, so it wouldn't be a good idea to follow the plant paradox and be vegetarian, because you would not get any of your protein.
Correct.
I mean, it'd be hard to get your
It'd
protein,
be
I should say.
very difficult to
Yes.
get enough food.
And I personally have learned it's very difficult to do multiple, be keto and keto and
Gluten-free.
Combine it with anything,
and everything
right.
else. I've tried multiple different things, and it's very difficult.
I'm glad you've tried them yourself, though, because when you're
yes.
talking to patients and they come either from their side or as practitioners, when you recommend specific diets for whatever reason, when you start to add on the different specific diets, it becomes very overwhelming for people. And then they tend to not do any of it because it's so confusing and frustrating. Even myself, I did the test recently to check for food sensitivities and get this overwhelming list.
Mm-hmm.
So that you have to prioritize. And that's where talking to a dietitian, nutritionist really can be very helpful, because number one, I do help people prioritize and do what's easy for them. Nobody wants to eat with stress, right? And when it just becomes very stressful for them, then
Well, that's not helping anything, right?
anything.
You're not going to
Whether
lose
it's
weight if
weight
you're
loss,
stressed out.
anything.
Yes, you're not going to sleep well. There's gut
Yeah.
dysbiosis.
Say stress alone alters our gut bacteria.
Absolutely.
It really does. So
And then another myth we hear is the opposite of that a vegan diet is healthier than an omnivorous diet.
Oh, absolutely not. I joke all the time that you can consume, sugar and potato chips are vegan, but does that mean you have a healthy diet? No. So taken out of context, simply by being fully plant-based or vegan does not mean that you in any way, shape, or form consume a healthier diet or are healthier than somebody who is not vegan. Quite honestly, we have to look at the quality of the overall diet, period.
So please bust this myth that eating healthy is expensive.
Oh, total myth. Okay, that's one that I can definitely help with as a mom, working mom, 4 kids. And it's hard to feed your family, healthy organic foods all the time. People say, I get this all the time, that it's too expensive to eat well. I completely disagree. When you go to any fast food place now, I don't know about you. Maybe, you probably don't go to fast food all,
eat fast
Deanna.
food.
But
I couldn't tell you last time I did.
if you pull in with my teenage kids and they want to go, it doesn't matter where. It's expensive, is my point. And it's so much cheaper, I didn't mean to, of course, healthier too,
Right.
to buy foods, raw ingredients and cook at home. And they don't even have to be fully raw ingredients. Like not everybody is a great cook and they don't enjoy it and they don't have the time and they get overwhelmed by that. So that's important to understand that simple, easy, healthy recipes are doable if you spend a little time planning. There are apps out there now that can help with your meal planning. You can talk to a health coach that that's my team of health coaches do. We help people put together quick and easy, like assemble healthy meals. If you can even cook whole grains, there are a lot of pantry staples to have.
Well, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is something that I've learned from like in the bodybuilder world and whatnot for watching sugars. If you prepare your meals, like if you make potatoes or rice as your starch maybe for the week and you put it in the freezer and you reheat it, like your sugar doesn't
your
spike.
Resistant starch?
Yes.
So you're creating resistant starches without even knowing it. That's good actually. So cooled rice and cooled starches. Not to get too much into that, but yes, that's a healthy way to do it. A lot of people don't like the chilled or cooled.
Oh no, if you reheat it, it doesn't even spike it.
Already,
so yeah,
right. It's created those. So those are resistant starches. What Deanna's mentioning, big fan, and so that's the added benefit of meal prepping in a healthy, economical way. I was very proud of my son recently. Well, I posted this, I think, on social media. He's going to laugh if he listens to this. That college student, he's out there. He prepped 5 meals. So he's in his apartment at school and went and bought meat to last for the week. And then he cooked up his grains and had his grains, his greens, and I think it was brown rice that he had used, and kind of created his own version of, a steak and like a version of I'll have to mention Chipotle, like his bowl, instead of going to Chipotle and buying it. So
wow, that's impressive.
It was impressive, right? And everybody can do that, but it does take time and it takes planning. But in general, if you then cost it out, it is much more cost effective to do the meal prep and planning at home, and ends up being the healthy way to do it.
So I have a few more questions.
Okay, I know I'm talking a lot
right, I know,
here.
no,
There's
I love
so many
this.
myths. Thank you.
All
Yeah,
right,
it's
so
fun.
breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Ooh, so is that a myth? Okay, I think that is a myth. Well, I guess these are all myths. And of course not, because many people worldwide don't even eat breakfast. And a lot of that is cultural. So if you're somebody like me who just loves to start their day with their black coffee, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I want to mention here is the term breakfast, break fast, is about breaking the fast. And so my little wrench in this myth is that first meal that you eat, whether we call it breakfast or not, the first meal that you do eat is really important, because think about that. That's the first thing you're putting into your body after your hopefully overnight fast, unless you're somebody who's eating in the middle of the night. But
And we're big advocates of the fasting. And we have a podcast on fasting. So if you haven't listened, go back and listen to it.
Oh, I did. It's excellent. Yes. And leaky gut. I mean, some very specific things. I love how you handle these other like specific nutrition topics, because leaky gut came up, and you have a great leaky gut one. Fasting, it's important for all humans. I'm a big proponent and fan of fasting. So in any case, back to breakfast. It can be the most important meal, because maybe for some people that first meal is their only meal. Mm-hmm. So either way, I like to tell people, start your day, whatever, if it's at 1 p.m. or 10 a.m., doesn't matter. Do consume something with protein and fiber.
That is exactly what I like to preach to.
Okay,
I love it.
And some people have a hang up about breakfast foods only being for the morning.
Yes.
Right? You can eat an omelet for dinner. You can eat...
I agree. Have avocado toast for dinner. I don't stick to that myself. Yeah. My son just got him a poke bowl for breakfast, I guess.
And then what about the idea of having to eat small, frequent meals for good health?
Oh, that's a great myth to bust. Okay, so that is so not true. And again, all of these statements you're making are the myths. I'm glad you're calling that one out.
You mean that doesn't increase your metabolism?
It does not increase your metabolism.
Really?
How many times did I hear that in weight management classes that I was running? That's a biggie. That was really not helpful for a lot of specifically women. I wanted to say, like, women in general, I saw so many women overeating. Like, if you're a petite person, you don't even need that many calories in a day. But eating frequently is the opposite of what most people think. So fasting is good for us and is actually good for good gut bacteria, for weight management. Eating, this is my tagline, too much, too frequently, and too late at night is a great way to gain weight. So just the too frequently part of that is really counterproductive to weight management. Okay, before we start to talk about insulin levels and that, just suffice it to say that eating frequently is not good for your metabolism or weight management specifically. If you need to gain weight, absolutely.
So let's talk some about supplements. So one of the myths that we hear from other providers to our patients is that taking dietary supplements is a waste of money, or that all it does
it out.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Expensive urine.
I think you all know what I'm going to say. At least I hope you do. That is a myth. I think there more and more, and this is really important to understand, old school thinking is old school thinking, right? We can't go and take, that was an old school thought, in other words. There are so many excellent supplements out there, and it's because it's an unregulated area. Dietary supplements are unregulated, and there truly is the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a lot of products that I could flat out call a scam, but don't lump them in the same category as other products that are very, very much needed. And again, back to personalized nutrition and the testing. I'm a big proponent and fan of testing. You even do micronutrient testing.
Yep.
You can't take the whole population and say the entire population needs X supplement. Absolutely not. That's a disservice to people and could actually be harmful. Can't even tell you how many people I see when I see their blood work. They're taking supplements because somebody told them to, rather than, asking the doctor or a dietitian and actually.
So many times as my neighbor takes this, they said I should take it. And I'm like,
I've seen people taking 3 different forms of B vitamins. More is not better.
yeah.
Right? I've seen very, very high levels of B12 when people think the entire world is low in B12. That's not true. So it's got to be very specific. In general, the more we learn about nutrition science and this whole area of not just functional medicine, but functional nutrition and that, it's exciting. And I love that there are more and more excellent products out there because people still don't eat the perfect diet. And there are a lot of chronic diseases that need to be managed with that twofold approach through diet and supplements. And that can keep them off other more expensive medications.
We agree. And then one supplement we think is being overutilized, and the myth is that calcium supplements are necessary for bone health.
Oh, right. I see people women taking 1,200 milligrams of calcium and thinking they're doing something good for their bones. I'd say stop that today and then go and do get your blood checked. But are they taking vitamin D? Are they getting vitamin K? I did a podcast on osteoporosis, and you all did too, didn't you? Do you have an osteoporosis one? As I promote it? Okay,
No.
not yet. That's another
Like, not
topic.
yet.
It's really, really
But we did
important.
talk about
the
vitamin
studies-
D and K too.
Yes,
And
exactly.
how
Okay.
important that is.
And by the way, your podcast on osteoporosis was excellent, which I recommend people listen to.
Give it a plug here.
But we
Yeah.
think that
So-
people get enough calcium in their diet. for the
Most
most
people
part.
get enough calcium in their diet.
Well-
And again, without dairy, and I can talk a lot about that because, even having all those vegetables, back to a healthy whole foods Mediterranean diet, when you simply eat a less ultra processed food that's high in sodium. So these high sodium diets, believe it or not, are actually the worst for our bones. It's really interesting.
That is.
Yeah. But in any case, most people do get enough dietary calcium, and then you have to exercise. You have to look at your overall diet, but please stop just pumping, calcium supplements into your body without knowing, because it actually can be damaging. Recent study did come out that showed that taking calcium supplements alone does not prevent progression of osteoporosis and osteopenia and osteoporosis. So that's really important.
And then another supplement or another myth is that everybody should be taking a probiotic.
Oh, is that a new myth? Okay. It's so individual. I can't say the whole world needs to start taking, because how many different bugs are there?
And not all probiotics are created equal. And
Of
when I
course.
see people just grabbing stuff off the shelf at the Walgreens, I'm like, no,
Me
they're
too.
not
I
the
cringe.
same.
I
Like,
cringe.
yeah. And so, a lot of times you can, there's criteria that we like to suggest, for a good probiotic.
Same with me. Sorry, I had to swallow there. And again, to do a diet assessment first. If you know your patients, how they eat, and they get really, I just had somebody who was very aware of probiotics versus prebiotics. Prebiotics are simply fiber.
Right.
That's high fiber foods that fuel good bacteria in your own gut. And if you do consume, say, yogurt and kefir, and some people do drink kombucha every day or have miso soup, they love, sauerkraut is big now, and there are a lot more fermented foods. In other words, even the sourdough bread, some cheeses. So there are good sources of probiotics, and some people do eat good, healthy diets that are naturally high in good bacteria. So no, we
Not
do not
everybody
not
needs
everybody
a probiotic.
Not yes,
Exactly. And speaking about fiber, so what are your thoughts on the fiber supplements are a good substitute for high fiber foods?
Definitely not.
I agree. I hate that. I'm like, no, we need to eat the fiber. Now, if somebody's not going to be eating the fiber and we know their diet is just not going to change, they just, if they're just that type of person,
Then help them out,
then,
right? And
then
say,
take the
yes.
fiber supplement. But
Agree.
I'm also a bigger fan of fiber powder over the fiber capsules. Like
Yes.
the capsules and the gummies, like hardly have any fiber in them,
Right.
and usually they're full of other crap too.
See,
And then like the
in that
powder is
realm
straight
of-
up, psyllium husk is, that, or Acacia.
Yes,
if I
those
said
are
it
good for you.
correctly.
Yes,
Yeah.
you did. So psyllium husk powder would fall into the good category. Again, it's very it's not just subjective, it's just the wild west of supplements. So no, don't go out and get fiber in a pill. Start to eat more high fiber foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. Even avocados are high in fiber.
Yes, they are.
I always love to
Yes.
mention that. Yeah.
Yeah.
People just think of it as a source of fat, and it's not. It's really good for your gut health.
And one last question.
Okay. A lot.
Replacing sugar with honey, agave, or maple syrup is healthier than using sugar.
I'm going to say that's another myth, obviously. So no, that is not true. Yeah, the reason
This
is
one I find disappointing.
it is disappointing.
I mean,
but
I'm
what
not
are
a fan of agave, but honey and maple syrup being pure and
they
not.
are and there are those who promote using honey and maple syrup over a refined table sugar. So I would agree with that.
I am that person.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's talk about this.
Yeah, if somebody's going to use an added sugar, then I agree with that. Again, make it like the healthiest version of something. And there are, let's say, the benefits for using local honey as far as your immune function goes.
Yeah, it helps you with allergies, getting the local pollen and whatnot. Right.
Exactly. And
I feel like there's more
maybe
nutrients. But I could be wrong. You are the dietitian.
Well, I never say any source of sugar, like an added sweetener, is a way to think about putting vitamins in your body.
Right.
You're adding a simple sugar. And again, it comes down to calories, your dental health. What are you putting it on and in? So let's say you're having
Oatmeal.
a bowl of okay.
Let's think about oatmeal. Like
Yes,
I used
and
to,
you
I
drizzle
grew
a little
up
honey.
putting brown sugar in my oatmeal, right? And now I don't
Honey's
put
a good
anything. Like,
right,
I eat
okay,
it
so-
with like nuts and blueberries and raisins
excellent.
if needed.
That was a great switch. That's a really good example, a relevant example, because a lot of people are eating oatmeal. This comes up all the time. And I also don't add a sweetener to my oatmeal because I put in the fruit and cinnamon and nuts, and I have like a savory oatmeal. And I put a sprinkle of salt, though, because it makes it very tasty.
It does bring it out.
And people become dependent on that sweet taste. And that's what I'm going for, is to kind of detox the taste buds from the need to have sugar all the time. I don't think oatmeal needs sugar. I know people love that. And so let's say, okay, Susan, I hear you, but I still want it to be sweet. I would do a little drizzle of honey, absolutely, over, teaspoons of sugar. Also I was going to say, let's say you're somebody who eats a bowl of plain yogurt. I'm a big fan, and you want fruit and a drizzle of honey. That's a really good
That's
source
what I do
of-
too.
yeah,
I do a drizzle of honey. Yeah.
then you get probiotic and actually
Just a
some
small
prebiotics.
drizzle.
Yeah.
Yes.
It all works together for your overall health and gut health. So
Fabulous. Well, I loved this podcast, and I feel like I could talk to you for another hour, but we'll just have to have you back.
Yes.
this is so
Well,
fun. I
Yes.
would love to come back. Thank you.
Thank you,
both.
Susan. Can you tell our audience how they can hear about you or listen to your podcast?
Sure. Since I did give a plug for my podcast and that osteoporosis episode specifically, think it helps people.
You have several good ones.
I thank you. So it's called A Sense of Wellness Podcast, SENSE, Sense of Wellness Podcast. And again, I'm the National Director of Wellness Services at Castle Connolly Private Health Partners. You can find my podcast and more information about me too at ccphp.net, and the SENS Solution Wellness Program at sens.ccphp.net. And again, I'm Susan Greeley. I also have susangreeley.com. It's a little neglected because I'm busy, but yeah, that's me. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
The information contained in this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended for the purposes of diagnosing, curing, treating, or preventing any disease. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Before using any products or services referenced on this podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, carefully read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information found or received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem or should you have any healthcare questions, please promptly call or see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Dr. Brian Marias, Deanna Weilbacher, and Hybrid Medical Solution, do not claim responsibility for any adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for any statements made by the guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referenced.
If you would like to submit any questions or if you have any topics you would be interested in hearing about on future episodes, please contact us through our website, www.hybridmedicalsolution.com. That is solution with no S at the end. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, all under Hybrid Medical Solution.